So, the opening of Terminator Genisys in 2029 is the post-Terminator 1 timeline. This is a future that has been affected by the events of Terminator 1. Then, when they travel to 1984, it's another alternate timeline that is not the Terminator 2 timeline. We'll call this the Pops timeline. Then they jump to 2017. Now, this is a jump forward in time, so it doesn't alter the past. Ergo, this is not a new timeline. This is the continuation of the Pops timeline. So, what was the event that caused the Pops timeline? The timeline change was the T-1000 and Pops being sent back to Sarah Connor's childhood. Kyle Reese and the John Connor T-3000 have jumped into an alternate timeline unrelated to their own. Which raises the question, how did they wind up in the Pops timeline? The thing is, the one mystery they leave for the sequel to Terminator Genisys is that we don't know where Pops and the T-1000 jumped from. They wanted to keep Pops' origins secret, so now it's weird. Because a Pops timeline was always going to jump over the events of Terminator 2, and the T-800 was always going to be destroyed with or without the intervention of new Kyle Reese or the John Connor Terminator 3000. This would either push Judgment Day and human victory past 2029, which we know hasn't happened at the start of Terminator Genisys, or stop Skynet's birth. Pops and the T-1000 come from an unknown timeline. We don't have any information about it other than they both came from there. That means we can't place it between any of the other timelines, and we have to wait for the unnecessary sequel. We've got the original timeline, we've got the timeline Terminator 1 caused, we've got the post-Terminator 1 timeline of 2029 that Terminator Genisys starts in. We've got the Pops timeline, which is 1984 to 2017 version of Terminator Genisys. We've got the Terminator 2 timeline, pre-Terminator 3 timeline that we never see, Terminator 3 timeline which ends with Terminator Salvation. And somewhere in there we've also got various timelines from the Sarah Connor Chronicles. That is a lot of alternate timelines, all created when another timeline messes with time travel. And that honestly is the simplest way of displaying them all. One problem. The Nexus point Pops talks about when Kyle's talking about his future memories. That's an unexplained sticking point. It's implied Terminator Genisys version of Kyle Reese only got his future visions for the Pop timeline because he was in the time displacement device, as the alternate timeline he was going to was swapped with the Pops timeline. How could he have whole new knowledge of the new timeline when the John Connor Terminator 3000 hadn't jumped in to create Skynet and Genisys yet? He has no experience in that timeline, anything from its future. This gives the impression that when Kyle Reese jumped in, it was destiny that the John Connor T-3000 come in and recreate Skynet. Otherwise, he'd have no vision of what the John Connor T-3000 would later do. He would have no knowledge of Genisys being created and really being Skynet, which is something that wouldn't happen without the John Connor T-3000, who again travelled back in time well after he did. This would conflict with the other Terminator films, where there is in fact no fate but what they make for the timelines they travel to, but they can't change the fates of the one they travel from. It instead implies that they travel from alternate realities to go to the Pops timeline, which for some reason is a closed loop all by itself. Genisys doesn't delete Terminator 2, so it's free of that damning criticism, but Kyle Reese's premonitions are a mess. Sure, it works as a plot point in the film and it's a little bit timey-wimey and we can make some Doctor Who references off of it, but that foreknowledge and those visions in a complete separate timeline that don't gel with the rest of the Terminator time travel rules, that's a little bit silly. Thanks for sitting through this bit of headcanon about the time travel in the Terminator universe, or universes. Does this theory work for you? Have you got an alternative? Am I a big dumbass? Tell me, comment, like, even subscribe. You can do it in this reality, but possibly not an alternate one.